Okay, what questions do you have about your max array deck? Actually, more importantly, not so much about your max array deck, but your array deck methods that you needed to add.
Well, yeah.
So the equals method. Okay, so we started to look at the equals method, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to the equals method. So let's open that up.
There was like a link to the lecture on
Mhm.
the homework. I feel like that was pretty helpful.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah, and so what you probably had where Zoom really has to do something better with these. I guess I'll hide
And
my floating means controllers.
can we put our progress okay,
Yep.
where we're at?
Once we're done with yeah, at the end of the day, I want you to go ahead and submit them to GitHub. That's comparable. Pull that up. That's array deck. Array deck. Here you go. Okay. So for our array deck, our dot equals main method. Okay, so a couple things with our dot equals method. First of all, you make sure you're using the at override because this is the one where it's really easy to screw up your at override, right? Because what are you going to mess up with your override? Exactly. So you're going to put something other than an object here, right? But it has to be object. If you did sort of look at the code from the lectures, or you look at code in general, you'll often see this code right here. Okay. So if O equals null, so if this object is null, return false. If this equals null, return true. Why are we doing that line right there, that second line? If this equals O, we got object O up here.
It's like an int, it will just be true.
Doesn't have to be an int, and actually couldn't be an int because it's an object.
The same thing.
If it's the same, if it's literally the same thing, saves a lot of time and effort, right? So I don't have to go through all this comparison if it's actually the same thing in memory, right? So we're just going to do a quick test for that. And this is standard. This is not like, oh, that's really unlikely. No, we're going to check for that just to optimize code. And then there's this whole thing of if get class does not equal other.get class, return false, and then we cast. So we've got 3 different if checks before we even get around to casting. And then we have this ugly cast of ArraySet other equals ArraySet O. Yeah, Alex.
The original dot equals method have the first 2 lines, like the if.
Does the original what?
Dot equals method?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, does it just have those 2 lines? Like, is that how it's built, or is that how yeah.
Well, no, what do we inherit from? We looked at it last class. What do we inherit from the object class?
So like something equals oh this.
It's just equals equals. So if it's null, it's null. If it's whatever it is, that's it. This is what we inherit from the object class right there. So it's completely useless, ostensibly, right? It will check the first 2 things, right? Because if it's just going to say equals equals, so it'll check these 2 things and that's it. It won't do anything beyond that. Okay. With our array deck, do we care about order?
Yeah.
We do care about order, right? So in this one, we want to make sure that not only are the same things in the 2 array decks, if we're using equals, we want to make sure they're in the same order. Okay, so that's another piece of this. But the better way, does anyone know what the better way of doing all this sort of nonsense is? The first 4 lines of this code here?
Well, what I did is I just created 2 temp variables and set and check if they're null or not, and then if they're not null, then check if they're equal.
What do you mean 2 temp variables? For what and what?
like this dot next and, other dot next.
For an array deck, we shouldn't be using .next. For a linked list deck, we might, but not for an array deck. We don't even have a next. Do we?
We have first.
Yeah, we got first and sort of, I used sort of like next first, and you gotta be a little careful with your first and last, right?
Well, I did like a for loop.
You did a for loop, okay. So the terminology here is a little bit different. What we want to use, am I in the right place here? Get rid of that for a second. Is with our dot equals method is this. Okay, so we are going to check that first thing. If this equals object, return true. Okay, so we're going to make that first check. Then you're going to do this really nice little nomenclature. If object instance of array deck O. This does like 3 things in once. Okay. So what are we covering here when we do if object instance of array deck? What line of code is being covered here? The cast?
Yeah.
Or the one before that? It's actually doing both. So it does these 2 lines right here together. So it actually checks whether, because it's instance of, so the get class is equal to other get class. It's making sure that whatever this object is actually an array deck. Okay. As well as casting it to this O. Okay. So this line right here, if object instance of array deck, and you can see the O there at the end, that is the cast. Okay. And this is checking to make sure that this thing is actually an array deck. Because if it's a set, would we really want to compare it to an array deck?
No.
No. We might want to compare other decks, but for the most part, we just want to compare array decks to array decks. Okay. So we use that instance of piece right there. That's the key to your equals. Okay. And then what variable do we use for the rest of our code? O, because other is no longer, we're not using, that's an object. We're not using that anymore.
Better comment as boolean equals object of or object.
It doesn't, you can flip those however you want to. This is a variable name. So you could have this be your O and this be object, whatever you want to do. Just make sure you're clear on being consistent. What other questions do we have? We do want to be a little bit careful with how we test all the things in our array deck. Okay. And then we have the confusion of the max array deck, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on our, because we've already done the 2-string, right? So we're good with our 2-string. We did that like 3 different ways. So if you, my recommendation is that you use string builder for your array deck 2-string. So we need our 2-string, we need our equals, and we need our iterators. Those are the 3 things we were adding. Yeah, man. Will you share your screen if you don't mind? Let's take a look. So this is the time to work through these things. I ultimately at the end of the day, I would like to have those 3 methods in array deck and your max array deck all working. So that's the goal of the day. You guys can work together a bit, or at least help each other. Oh, my screen's frozen. Let me unfreeze. There we go. That's more helpful.
For like the 2-string, is that you want the same kind of format?
Yeah, let's do the curly braces. Let's do pretty much the same we did as we did for the array set, right? Curly braces, commas, nothing at the end, right? Okay, so let's look. Let's all help debug, because this will probably help you as well. Cannot find symbol class iterator. So let's go ahead and just copy this out for right now. That all the way down to there. and run it again. Let's just see what errors we're getting when we just do that. Let's just, and again, I highly recommend you break this into little pieces. Do your equals method, make sure it's working. Do your two-string method, make sure it's working. Do your iterator, make sure it's working. So just, that's,
I tried to just test it like this, but then it just gives me a max for it.
yeah, so if your max array deck isn't working, then you got a problem. So just go back over to max array deck for a second. And get rid of your comparable on that one just for right now. And that will hopefully. Okay, keep going. Let's run it again. Let's just see what else it's doing. Let's see return statement. Oh, it's not gonna like any of those. Just comment out all of your max array deck.
No, wait, shouldn't it be like extends?
Yeah, but she hasn't implemented any of the methods, so it's gonna be missing all the return statements. So yes, you're right, but just like, we're not gonna fix that right now in this moment.
Cause you have another like.
Go up top.
Star splash over there.
You gotta get rid of this one. There you go. Okay, now we should be good, or at least we should be able to figure this out. Okay. Okay, array deck does not. I just get rid of iterable for the moment.
Would you implement that?
Yeah, you should be implementing deck. Because that's what we had in there. Okay, there we go. Method size. Okay, cool. That's what we're looking for. Method size, method get. Okay, so scroll up because these should be in here, right? Okay, public int size, return size. 15. My guess is that you just have an extra curly brace in here somewhere that's closing those off. So I would just start checking curly braces. So go down, down. And somewhere in here, my guess is you closed off a class. It's equals two-string. Let's go up a little bit. Yeah, check your bottom. Yeah, go down to actually all the way down to the bottom to see. Make sure, okay, that one's that one. How about this one? Cannot find method size, cannot find method get. Ints. Okay, go all the way to the top. This is where your debugging can become tedious because you can't even get into your methods. Last. So. All right. So we could do one of two things. Go ahead and go down to your main method for a second. Try this. Go ahead. Where do you call size? Don't call size. That's the interesting thing. Okay, go ahead and debug it just from right here. Just go. Well, why is it not giving you the ability to run from your main method? Click on debug.
Should I not be in my?
Main should be in your class.
Oh, you're wait.
Yeah. Because we didn't have a deck runner in this thing. Okay.
The indentation looks weird.
This indentation is weird, but I mean that's not gonna make a difference, right? But that's why I'm thinking that something is just not picking up, but your size is there. That's what's kind of weird. Okay, so this is a great time to do this. Grab everything. Pop it into your AI of choice. And if you don't mind doing this, like. And I have been experimenting, just so you all know, apparently
Like in the wrong matter
for
for size.
for size did you have that's the other thing I was gonna look at. Did you have a parameter for size?
Variable ARR of
Yeah, of type T, but size is just returning size. It's just an int. Right? Where is size? In public int size, return size. That seems pretty. Right? In the code, it's just not finding size.
Can you just like search for all the size methods and use?
Just drop it in. Just do me a favor. Just drop it in there. Oh, it might not like that you're calling resize, but it's not a compile time. I just copy paste your code and then say, why isn't this working? Why isn't size being recognized in other methods? I've been experimenting with Copilot and Claude because apparently they're better with coding step questions. I haven't decided. Oh, issues in the resize method. But that shouldn't matter, actually. No, that's not it. In the equals method. Oh, because you're calling the okay, there we go. That's why. Okay, go back to your code. I see it. Okay, actually, what I want you to do is you see it. It's here. It's issue 2. It's not issue 1. So this is where this can be really handy because we're not getting like, it's not being overwhelmingly like, here's how to rewrite your code, right? It's giving us one subtle hint, which is right here. So go back to your code for a second and I'll try and point it out from this. But this is what I want you to be able to do is be like, oh, okay. So when you go to your, somewhere in here on line 115, go to line 115. We should have picked this up first. Line 115 is in your equals method. But what you're doing is you're going through if array.size is not equal to O.size. Well, O is what type of thing?
Well, I had previously like cast it.
No, hang on. What is O? It's an array deck. You've cast it here. But what's this? Scroll to the top. What's array? It's an array. We can't call size on an array. That's what it's talking about. So go back to your code there. So there is this, so it's right, there is no size method here, right? But what do we need to call size on here?
This.
Do I have to?
No.
I don't, but it is this that we're talking about. No, so because this is a non-static method, so you should just be able to call size. If size does not equal other size, return false. And then down here, the get, you're also calling get on an array. We can't do that. So it should be just get I, that should work. That should be it. And this is the correct code, right? If I'm checking size, once I know that other's an instance of array deck, I check the size of these things, return false. I could probably do the size check. Well, no, I can't. And then this get is proper because we're checking to make sure the same things are in the same places. Don't want to use a for each loop. You can try it and see what happens. Go for it. You're not going to be able to do this.
It like tells you the arrow is like 115.
Okay. But that is where using AI can be helpful in terms of just being like, okay, like give me a clue here as to what I might have done wrong. That probably would have taken me, because I haven't had enough coffee this morning, a little bit longer to find, right? And we should have just gone, right? What's the first thing you should do? You should go to the line that it's throwing the error on, not try and figure it out some other way. What else have we got? What other questions do we have about getting done our iterator? Any issue there?
No.
Two-string equals. This is your opportunity because I, again, would like this thing done by the end of class. All right, max array deck. Did max array deck throw any issues for people? I'm assuming yes.
What do you want for like math?
Okay, so if we go into the instructions here, right? And we look at what this thing is. Okay, we've fully implemented our array deck. What other issues are we having with our array decks? Right now is the time to ask questions about your array deck, your iterators, all that, right? So you should be able to throw in right down here, in your main method right now, everyone do this. Create a deck, an array deck. Okay, we'll make it just not even a max array deck. We're gonna make this a straight up, array deck. Woohoo. And then you're going to, gonna make an array deck and you're gonna use a for each loop to print through it. Yep.
Could you check my use of instance of it since like red?
Yep. Do you mind sharing it? Just because that's going to be helpful to all of us. So what you should be able to do is, oh, you're not seeing what I'm doing, which is a good thing. You should be able to throw in a couple of array decks. Build two array decks, check if they're equal. And you should also, what did I say? Use a for each loop to print one out. So for double. What do we got? Because this right here. What are we checking as an instance of array deck?
Other.
Other, there you go. And it is instant for like no capital O. Like so Java's the one thing that drives me a little bit batty about Java is that sometimes like substring, well, substring an instance of, right? It's two words, like we should capitalize the O, but sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. You just gotta kind of pick up on that. So instance of is no capitalization. This O is correct, so I don't know why. Is that an O?
It's not in the-
Oh, you're not nested. This has to be nested. So this for loop has to be inside of this if statement. Just get rid of that curly brace for a second. It's gonna be easier bet, I think. Right, and then indent all of down here. Does that look right? Yeah. Indent from there to all like this. Yeah, you can grab it all and indent it all at once, but that's cool. And then throw in one more curly brace somewhere in there before or after that one. There you go. Missing return statement. You gotta, yep. Nope. What do we want to return at the end of this thing? True. Return true, yeah, because you've checked everything else, so if it checks all the boxes, there you go. Nice. Okay, so we should, in our main method, we should be able to build two array decks. We should be able to do regular iteration, not ugly iteration. So we should be able to get rid of this now and use a regular for each loop if your iterator is working. And then somewhere down here, we should be able to call lists our dot equals method and not have any issues. And then a two strings would be nice too.
I don't think my dot equals works.
You don't think it works? So
Two lists would be.
those two lists should not be 22. 22. You made it too complicated. You got 5 things in the top one.
No, I removed one.
Oh, what do you removed last? But you removed last from the bottom one too.
Oh, I did. There.
Now they should be equal. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't worry.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, Mary, we got. Huh? Problems with it or? Anyone else having trouble with Iterator? Everyone's got Iterator to work? Okay, you got iterator to work?
Yeah,
You
but
do?
I use like the ArraySet, like I changed different numbers. Like the array deck.
You took what we used in ArraySet and
No, I used like, I didn't use an ArraySet, but I used like. Structure, stuff from ArraySet.
It's basically just a comparison.
I mean, it's the same idea. Yeah, your iterator should not look all that much different. So if we start at the top, what do we need to do? What's the first thing we need to do? Oh, you got to put it back in, I think, right? Because we had you take a whole bunch of stuff out. So we need to implement, this thing should, array deck implements deck and iterable. That looks right. Okay. Iterable is going to force us to implement iterator. Return new array deck iterator. That looks right. Public class array deck iterator implements iterator. That looks right. Position equals 0. Next position less than, you flip these two. You've switched these two. Next is simply, so has next is going to be position is less than size.
Oh.
And next is going to be, and next is going to return a T. All right, wait. So we gotta, yeah, get rid of that line. Okay, has next, position less than size. That looks right. Now, why that would throw an error and say can't find class iterator is a different question. But those were switched. Why can we not find class iterator? Cannot find symbol class.
Did you import them? You have to implement.
Oh, yeah, at the very top,
Yeah, you have to import.
you have to import iterator. That may be why, but it's weird that it's not giving you the nice little red line. Yep. Just start typing, just hit enter and you'll get it. Yep. Nope,
No.
nope, just your, yep. There you go. It's weird that it wasn't under, because normally it'll obviously, when you go to the iterator, you don't have to go there. But typically what it'll do is it'll underline this and say, hey, you're not, this doesn't exist. But that was the piece. Yep. Yep.
Do you have to like implement like deck? Because if I implement deck, it will like throw me like a bunch of arrow tones. Like,
Yep, you should be implementing deck.
when
What errors are you throwing? So in our deck, right? Remember, here, I'll let me reshare. What we should have in our deck is, let's see, I'm still screen mirroring. We should have add first. I have a weird deck here. So in my deck interface, apparently I have add first is empty size, print deck, remove first, remove last, and get. And all of these publics should be gone. Theoretically, none of these should actually be here. Why? Why do we think that we get rid of the publics? Not that we have to, but why? Why would we get rid of public here? Well, if I hover over it, it's going to tell me, hey, it's redundant. It's an interface. They have to be public. If I made these private in an interface, it wouldn't be an interface anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I'd have to have getter methods inside my interface, which doesn't make any sense. The whole point is that they're public. So it's just redundant. So you can leave them or get rid of them, whatever you want. Okay. But yes, you should be implementing. So this array deck should implement deck and iterable. I did notice something that's a problem with Mary's code. Sorry, Mary. Which is what should we be doing with our max array deck? And actually, Tony, you said this. What should I be doing with? I should be extending what?
extending array deck.
Yeah, I should. That's exactly. I should be. Whoops. I thought I was sharing. Wasn't I? Okay. You should be. I'm gonna lock for a minute. You should be extending array deck 100%. Okay. I need to move a few things out of the way here. Okay, so, and you're going to ultimately, you're going to make sure that you implement comparator. Okay. But you should extend ArrayDeck so you don't have to implement all those methods.
Because the other thing, it was like, don't just copy and paste.
Right.
So you just don't have to override.
You do have to override. Well, actually, do you have to override anything to make a max ArrayDeck work?
You don't have to.
No, you don't have to. Right? You're gonna have it tells us that we're going to build max ArrayDeck, all the methods that an ArrayDeck has, but also has 2 additional methods in a new constructor. So we have this funky new constructor, max ArrayDeck, that takes in a comparator. Okay, so what's that going to look like?
What kind of comparator?
So that's a great question. So this is where we're going to dig a little deeper on comparators. So does anyone remember so we had this comparable, remember we had comparable here? Right, and that's we went through our dogs and our dog maximizer and everything else, right? So this one's a little different because in dog, we never had a constructor with a comparator in it. We didn't have that in maximizer. So what would a constructor with a comparator in it look like? Well, what's the signature heading on this thing going to be? What does a constructor look like for this thing? Public, max ArrayDeck, right? And I'm going to pass in, it tells me, it says I'm going to pass in a comparator. It's got to be a generic type comparator. It tells me that. See. Now, the only trick here is when I do, it's going to say I already did this. That's fine. What am I doing with this C? What do when I normally pass in this type of thing, what do I do with it? If I had any other constructor and I passed in a parameter, what do I do with it? Well, over here, if I have dog string s, int a, what do I do right here? I mean, I store it.
Like you put in your class, make an instance variable.
I make an instance variable for it, and then I pass that parameter to the instance variable, right? So what does that look like in this case? How could I do that here? Supply what we know. How could I do that here? What's that?
But like public, I mean like public comparator or C,
What's that?
you need to like instantiate a variable.
I need to, we're far enough along. We should be let's try to use proper terminology.
Instance variable.
I need an instance variable. I need to, do what with this instance variable? No, this is declare it. So I'm going to declare, should it be private or public?
Doesn't
Let's make it private and see what happens. Private comparator. T. Now, should it have the same variable name? Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call mine comp. And then down here, what am I going to do with it? Comp equals C, and I'm done with this piece of it. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that because, and you'll see why. But that's what I have to do. I have to have an instance variable that is a comparator. Okay, and then which is going to be right there, my comparator. See, my public max ArrayDeck. I will tell you that there's one other thing you need, which is just well, you'll see. So here is my max ArrayDeck with comparator C. That's it. That's my constructor. But I have to make it an instance variable first and then pass the parameter to the instance variable. Yeah.
Do we ever,
What do you mean?
like, deck, deck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What-
We
what
just,
are
we just talked about that. In ArrayDeck, right? You have to implement deck. If I extend ArrayDeck and it implements deck, what does that mean by default?
implementing-
That it, yeah.
Oh,
Yep. Okay. Okay. What are my other things here? I need two max methods. Returns the maximum element in the deck as governed by the previous given comparator. So this empty argument, no argument, max method is going to use the comparator we just made. And then we're going to have another max method that takes a comparator as an argument. How similar are those two codes going to look? Really similar. There's going to be one word difference, one couple characters difference. Okay. Max array deck will tell you whether the max element in itself by using the comparator given to the constructor. This gets a little bit weird. Or an arbitrary comparator that is different from the one that is given in the constructor. We do not care about the equals object method of this class, so feel free to define it however you feel most appropriate. Okay. What do our max methods look like here? So good question. Do I have access to the underlying array of array deck? What's that? Theoretically, we could potentially use super. For what? Where are we going to use super here? Okay. Are we going to need get? Got one yes. Does anyone have their max method working? All right, you guys got 20 minutes to crank out and figure out how to get these max methods to work. You have the basis of what you need. You may talk amongst yourselves. Remember, a max method is just like it's a max or min method like anything else. Okay. We can think about what method I get from having a comparator. So that's the important part here. What do I have from having a comparator? What's up? And here you can use a for each loop. So iteration can be really helpful here. But what method do I get from a comparator? If I come back over here to where it happened to my dogs. I didn't dump my dogs, did I? Nope, there we go. Okay. So if I go look at my comparator here, this is comparable, right? And I look at my name comparator. What method do I get? Compare. Compare is the method I get. And how does compare work? Remember, this was the difference between compare to and compare, right? How does compare work?
There's this and the other two.
Well, no, actually it doesn't. Because it's a static class and a static method ostensibly. So what am I comparing when I compare?
Hey,
A and B, two external things. What about compare to? How does that work?
It's only one. Yourself.
Yourself compared to something else. So the compare to is me, myself, this object compared to something else. Compare, which is what we get from a comparator, compares two external things. Okay. So what are we going to use in our max method? Thank you. Yes. Right.
this one, I can't implement that. And that's also like put in.
Because you don't have that. You don't have the deck interface in there. And you don't want to implement the deck. Just get rid of that. You don't want to implement the deck interface from Java, which is what you're doing.
Oh,
Just leave it alone, because you don't have the, or you could add your array deck They're like. You can see. I have. Yeah, I guess I do have Jack Java, don't I? There you go. You could add in the interface. Honestly, it's not that important for what we're doing right now. As long as you have those methods, you're good. Get to it. You want? And I think it's working, but that's the current get on. Show me your build laptop and show me this experiment. We call it Iterator. Okay, good. Think about that was spent so much time on one thing.
Yeah.
The max part or the other
It was just a mixture, it was like, I copied it like the negative, I didn't have any maps.
So wait, this is your no parameter maps, right?
Yeah.
You have one with the parameter. Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
we need like a super for the no parameter, right?
For the no parameter, no, you don't.
Yeah, but it's giving me the error.
I don't believe you can super anywhere at all. Because what happens in the constructor if we don't call super before we instantiate our comparator?
Oh,
Ooh, I would get rid of this stuff comparator because it's not.
this one there.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, comparator.
Here.
Oh, because you need to have. So, yeah, so you're gonna see that you, when you go try to build this thing,
I did the document.
everyone's gonna want to pay attention to this because you're gonna run into the same error that Tony's running into. Is that you are going to need, and you'll see it up here somewhere, you're going to need an empty just constructor. And you can literally say public max array deck, no parameters, and leave that empty. So what happens here with both this on line 15 and this on line 16? What happens in both these cases with these two constructors? Thank you. There. This is line, guys, quicker. Line 15, I have just public max array deck, and there's nothing there except curly braces. And then line 16, public max array deck with this comparator, and I just say comp equals C. No super calls. Why not?
Cause you're extending,
Yeah.
so like you don't need a super to access all.
What? Well, does the super call need to happen under this? Do I need the rest of the constructor for max array deck?
We do need a super in like the one without parameter.
Okay, everyone's eyes up here. What do I need to do here with super? Here and here. Are these gonna work?
Yeah.
Why? As they are, these are gonna work right here.
Cause you're not, you're not using that.
You don't have access to the right area.
These work fine. Why? Super is automatically being called. Super just gets called.
any sense or
Huh?
always?
If I create a constructor like this, super is just by default being called. Okay, now if I want to do other things in there, I mean, could I put super in here first? Sure, I could. Okay, but I don't have to. It's automatically being called. And you'll see over here somewhere, I'll create a max array deck and this will work just fine. We're going to create a couple of max array decks, but I don't want to give away all the secret sauce. But I could do a max array deck here, max array deck. And if I run that, I should still get deck just fine and deck 2 just fine. Interesting question will be if they say that they're the same thing now. What do we think? Do we think that those two things will be equal? If I have a max array deck with 2.30 and 4.7 and an array deck with 2.30 and 4.7, are those going to be equal?
Yeah.
But one's a max array deck and one's an array deck. Right here, I've got the dot equals.
Subclass of array deck.
So it's going to be equal? Yes. Yes, it will be equal. They are the equal. But I should also be able to, if your iterator is working, you should be able to make sure that you use the for each loop. Okay. And now when I come back over to max array deck, you'll see, well, that's funny. This is now being used. Right. But that's handy to have. Donald, you done with max?
You can use a, probably like for these plans here, or, for the, I got, you know, yeah, for like,
So, right, and so in max, right, so on one of them. Yep, no, that's not fine. You're just gonna have, that was gonna be empty. Just like that. Okay, and then that's gonna be taking comparator, and it's what that's gonna go in here, it's mine. So for the first max, you're going to use that, yep, exactly, compare.
Okay, what?
Oh,
You'll see.
oh, wait.
Because there isn't. You'll see how we can do it. And you'll do it here. You'll do it. That's why it's here. And yeah, here. Okay.
Oh.
So real quickly, something that might be throwing people off. Actually, Donald, what's potentially throwing people off? So the constructor and what with the comparator? What do you think? What do you feel like you need to do inside of max array deck?
Instantiate.
Create some new, instantiate this new comparator. Do I do that anywhere? Do I create a comparator in here anywhere? Am I using, do I have a compare method? Do I finish this with new comparator anywhere?
We created a comparator.
Really? Where? You show me your new comparator.
Oh, don't know. Passing. Right?
We never instantiate this thing. We declare it.
We declare it, yeah.
We never instantiate it. Doesn't that seem weird?
Yeah.
Yeah, so where should you instantiate this thing?
In your main method.
In the main method. You're not going to instantiate this thing in your max array deck. The instantiation and the compare to method, why? Why could I not even possibly instantiate this thing in my max array deck? Why can't I do it?
You don't have to, you can just use.
No, why can't I do it? You know, let me put you on the spot. You're in the back. Right now, why can't I instantiate, give this an actual comparator and a compare to method? Well, I'll give you a hint. What am I using it on?
Constructor.
What am I comparing? In my max array deck, what am I comparing?
I don't.
Well, if we do it, it's gonna
Yeah.
be like external links.
What kinds of things? What objects?
Array X,
Huh?
array, no,
It's just T.
They're they are objects. Look, it's right. They're objects. They're T's. They're generics. How am I gonna compare two generics?
no, they are.
If I use dot compare, how am I gonna compare two generics?
Dot compare is greater than 0, then.
Oh, it will like keep calling itself, right?
No. Objects are, how am I gonna compare two picnic tables, or two trees, or two benches, or two fences, or two? Can I do that here? Is there some quality that I can compare for every object?
No.
No, right? Remember we talked about the natural ordering? Right, even unnatural ordering, I wanna compare, to picnic tables by how dark the stain is, that's how I'm gonna compare picnic tables. Well, I have no idea that when I'm doing max array deck, I need this to apply to anything I want to compare. So I don't instantiate the comparator because I have no idea what I'm comparing. Does that make sense? I have no idea what qualities I'm comparing. So this has to happen once I have actual array decks of things that I know what I want to compare.
But can
To
you
each
do
other.
like a T in there as well?
Yeah, well, we have to, we're gonna have max methods.
I mean, if you want to implement it inside of like max. or-
Here?
Yeah,
T what?
just T.
You can't compare T's. How am I gonna compare picnic tables?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, how am I gonna compare, I don't know, pieces of concrete, desks? I don't know, the size, the color, who knows, the price? So this has to stay without implementation. The comparator only gets implemented, and this is where this is weird. So this implementation of the comparator is going to happen in your main method. And I almost feel like we should probably have a deck runner in here. Should we make a deck runner? So let's think about this for a second. I'm gonna give you one more hint and then see if we can get there. If I'm going to, actually, who's pretty far along, who's got their max method up? Tony, you got a max method working?
I mean, that's it, but I think, yeah.
You think, yeah, okay. So go ahead and share your screen with us for a second. Am I still frozen? No. Because I want to show you sort of what needs to happen here. We go till 40? Okay, I'm gonna try and end a little bit early because I need to go pick up all my supplies for it. Okay. Okay, so go to let's look at comparator. See, I don't want to give away the code to everybody. Go ahead and go to your main method in, are you doing it in here?
Yeah. Yeah, we.
Okay, so why is it throwing an error on your new max array deck here?
Oh, is it?
Unchecked assignment. All right, that's fine. All right, so get rid of this object comparator for a second, just comment that out. And run your main method, just see if that's actually working. You have another main method running somewhere, yeah? Get rid of one of them. Okay, actually leave that. Get rid of the other one. Go over to your max array deck, just copy this. Copy that, and then get rid of the rest of it. Yeah, there you go. Okay, I'll go back over here, drop that in there somewhere. No, leave all that, we want that. But get rid of your ugly, well, Seer has next. Get rid of your ugly iteration. You should, we'll double check. So it's something you should have before each loop in here somewhere. Okay, max array deck, add first. It's a little bit weird that it's doing that here. Oh, because you printed up here. Get rid of your one print line here. That's not good. Okay. We got two max array decks. Oh, you already did that. Get rid of one of those. Cool. Okay. Now what we're going to try and do is call max. All right. So we want to call max on one of these things. Call it on, well, whatever. Just call it an array because, or actually that should be, yeah, there we go. That's why that was doing that weird. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Well,
Cannot invoke
computer side.
compare object to object because comparator, let's see what it says the rest of it. Scroll over and see what's got your error
Like
messages.
computer side.
Oh.
Guys are like 20%, so weird.
Uh,
Do you need a computer?
Okay,
Give me a second.
so if we think about this, we have to do one of two things to have a comparator work. What do we have to do? And actually, your code was perfect to sort of demonstrate this. You need one of two things. If we think about this, okay? He's calling max and he's trying to use a comparator. So I have one of two choices. Where can I put my comparator? There are two places I can pass in a comparator to make this thing work.
Put it in the mouth.
I can put it in the method. I can say max and pass in a comparator here. Or in the constructor, I can say max ArrayDeck equals new max ArrayDeck and pass in a comparator there. What do I need to do first in both of those cases?
The main method. Instantiated.
I need to create a comparator before I do either of those things. So the first step I need to do is create a comparator. Okay? And what you'll see when you create a comparator is, I really don't want to give away all this code, so we're going to come back over here, is we're going to see something like this. I've got this max ArrayDeck up here. It is, let's just get rid of, that's a max ArrayDeck. All right, so I'm gonna put this statement back in here. Deck 2 doesn't have a max because, and you'll also notice that you can't do this. Why can't I do this and call max on deck? Quick test of your Java remembrance skills here. I've got this as a declared static type ArrayDeck and an instantiated type, static type max ArrayDeck. I try and call max and it doesn't work. Why?
Oh, wait,
What doesn't have?
yeah.
ArrayDeck doesn't have a max method, and the compiler looks for max first in ArrayDeck because that's the static type. So if I make this a max ArrayDeck, now I get max down here. And let's just go ahead and get rid of my other print statements. Actually, I'll print deck 2 and I'll print deck that way. Let's just see. So I'm going to get deck. I'm going to get a whole bunch of things here. All right, but I should get max deck and I should get 0.0. Oh, now I'm throwing an error. Compare object to object because this .comp is null. Okay, so now I've screwed it up. So let's get rid of this for a moment. But the part of the problem is, what am I not giving this up here? What have I not given my ArrayDeck, max ArrayDeck? I've called max down here. All right, I'll move this up higher. What have I not done? Yeah, it doesn't have a comparator. It can't compare anything because it doesn't have a comparator. So max is going to say, hey, I've got nothing to work with here. So the first thing I need to do is create a comparator. Now the comparator construction is really weird, but IntelliJ is going to do it for you. Comparator. And what do I have to, you guys are going to want to pay attention to this, okay? Comparator, do I have to give it a type here? Yes, what am I comparing? Doubles, because that's my max ArrayDeck. Comparator double, CD, double comparator, there we go, DC, equals, now there's a couple of ways to do this, but the first, what's our guess? If I'm creating a new comparator, new comparator, doubles. Boom, look what just happened. Whoa. Add override, public int compare 00002. It fills in everything for me. It tells me that right here in the main method, to create this new comparator, I've got an override of compare. Why do I have to override compare?
You have to.
Why?
You're using it for the class.
Because it's a comparator. Comparator has to have a compare method. Now this allows me to return for two doubles. What do I want to return? for compare. O2, O1 greater than O2. And I'm done. Okay, it's going to say required int type, provided Boolean. What do I want to do there? So when I compare to which one do I want to be greater if I pass in these two things? Probably the first one. So I'm going to do O1 minus O2. It's still not going to like this. Required type int. We got a double. Just cast it as an int. We'll cast the whole thing as an int just because. Okay, because I don't really care. And then you'll see this little piece that you're going to miss. Where do I still have an error message on this board if you can see it?
Semicolon.
It's so weird. You got to put a semicolon after the curly brace. It's one of the very few places where you have to do this funky thing right here. Okay. Now I have a comparator. Now I can pass in. Now I have a constructor that takes in a comparator, right? My max array deck constructor that takes in a comparator. Where do I put that? If I look over at max array deck, I've got this constructor right here that takes in a comparator in its parameters. Where do I put that? Right here, max array deck double deck equals new max array deck DC. Boom. Now when I call deck.max, if I haven't screwed it up, it should tell me that the answer is 4.7. Boom. I could do this differently because where else can I pass in that comparator? I don't have to pass it in there. I have one other choice. We said it a minute ago. Put it in the max method, DC. That too will give me, hopefully, the same answer, unless I've screwed something up. You now have a couple of different options of where I could put that max method. I could also get the max of any type of thing. Because in here, when I'm comparing, maybe I make this comparison of dogs. And I make one, then I would have to do a little bit more work, right? But I would have dog 1 and dog 2. And I could return dog 1, what? What if this were dogs? Comparator of dogs. It's not going to like this, right? And actually, I can get rid of that entirely. And then when I compare, I would have something like dog 01 and dog 02. Not God. And then what would I return? I can't. Why can I not return 01 minus 02? Because they're dogs. What could I return? 01 dot size. You got it. That's where I was going. We've got some sort of public size method, right? We're going to say that a dog is max if it is bigger than the other dog. So that would be my code in that case. So I have to create a constructor and then pass in that constructor either in my, pass in the comparator in my constructor or pass it into my max method. I get those two choices. Either one will work depending on how I want it to structure. You all have to figure out how to make that max method work given those parameters. You will notice something really quickly. This is the easiest way to do this because it makes sense. But if I highlight over the new comparator here, it's going to say, hey, anonymous new comparator can be replaced with a lambda. We don't do a lot with lambdas, but they're really cool. So does everyone want to see a lambda? Boom, there's your lambda. So what just happened is it took those 5 lines of code and it says, okay, comparator dog, DC. It shouldn't be dog. You know, have to double because it's not liking that. Comparator double, and where did we go here? And here. And that is the exact same. Ooh. There we go. Okay. So this one line is the same as what we had. This is what's known as a lambda expression. Don't worry about it. for right now, I would stick with the new comparator and do the override and all that. But literally IntelliJ will do this IntelliJ did this for me, okay? This just says that I'm taking these two parameters and my return is O1 minus O2. It just takes those 4 lines of code and makes it into one. And obviously, if you're putting this in a main method, this is much nicer and neater than having 5 lines of an add override in your main method for a comparator. Okay. Too much?
No, just need some extra time to figure this method
A
out.
little time to sink in.
Yeah. This was a lot. So do me a favor. Did anyone figure out how to submit their code on in GitHub?
I just registered an account by.
You forked it?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Okay. So here's what I need you to do. I will put in for right now, for today, I will put in a box in I'm just going to make a new assignment. Submit the code, just copy and paste your code into, copy and paste your, shoot. Yeah, copy and paste everything. So copy and paste your 3 methods, your at least your equals, toString and iterators, and then copy and paste your max. Sorry, I should have done that earlier. Submit. What did I say? toString. I'm going to just put this in right now and then. So submit what you have, even if you're not done with your max array deck, because again, we'll need to have that be a little time. But do that right now. I'll clean that up in my statement there in a second. Oops, I can't clean that up because I got to do this right this minute. Oh, you do have text boxes. Perfect. Okay. So you're going to commit your toString, your equals, and iterator, and array deck, and submit. See, it's the one day I wanted Jackie to show up to talk you guys through how to submit to GitHub, but of course today was the day he was going to sleep in. So
You wanted to submit
Uh,
a max.
yeah, submit a max array deck. You got it. There you go. So submit what you got, even if it's not complete. Because yeah. And then maybe yeah, I'll tell you what, the goal is to get this completely done by our, what do we think? Is that fair by final? Okay.
So final seven.
We have, it's not until Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday afternoon. Okay, so you got plenty of time to do that. I'm around to give you help. It's not that hard once you figure out the little quirks. Like it's not a ton of code. It's not particularly hard. The hardest part is what I just showed you, figuring out like, oh, I've got to create a comparator and then pass it in. So that actually was sort of gave away that special sauce. Have an awesome rest of your day, everybody. All right, now we got to run up to Silverado and then run back.